The Orioles saw a lot of players return to their lineup and to the roster on Tuesday, and it helped them to another win and a series-clinching victory over the Chicago White Sox. And I'll recap it coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Wednesday, September 17th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' victory over the Chicago White Sox on Tuesday night. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including Jordan Westburg returning from the injured list, Dean Kremer returning from that forearm issue where he skipped a start, and us getting to see Chase McDermott come out of the bullpen and some big home runs and big days from the young Orioles in the lineup. Then I'll tell you a little bit more about Jose Castillo, the left-handed reliever who the Orioles claimed off waivers from the Mariners early this week, and finally jump into the couple of roster moves the Orioles made on Tuesday to get those players back to the big leagues. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So we start today, with what looks to be an Orioles win, just because of things I had to do and timing and whatnot. I began recording this episode here. We're in the bottom of the 8th inning in Chicago. It is Orioles 8 and White Sox 3. There are 2 outs and 2 on in the bottom of the 8th inning, and Chase McDermott is about 30 pitches into his kind of big league return to the Orioles bullpen. It's not fully over right now. It's getting a little bit dicey in the 8th inning, but got to do what you got to do. I'm assuming the Orioles are going to get these next 4 outs without giving up 5 runs and still find a way to win this game. So let's say they do. I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from this Orioles victory. The first thing you need to know is Jordan Westburg returned from the injured list for the Orioles on Tuesday. Westy, who had been out since August 19th with a right ankle sprain. It was kind of a weird play in the first inning of a game at Fenway Park when he essentially was just trying to go first to third, put the brakes on when he got around second base, and just came around the base awkwardly, tweaked his ankle, immediately came out of the game, and then a couple days later went on the injured list. And at the time, it was the 10-day injured list, and the way Tony Mansolino talked about it, it was like, yeah, it's going to be about 2 weeks for Westburg. He should be okay, and then we'll see him back. And it ended up being almost a month that Westburg missed with that injury. He did come back and play 3 rehab games in AAA over the weekend, actually hit 2 home runs in that final rehab game on Sunday, kind of showing he was ready to go. DH in the lineup on Tuesday. Mansolino said he will go back to play third base, at least on Wednesday and Thursday. He did draw a walk. He had an RBI fielder's choice to tie the game at 2 back in the 3rd inning. Still yet to pick up that first hit back, although we'll see if he bats in the top of the 9th inning. Unlikely, but hey, this season for Westburg, this is just the 74th game he has played in. Now, if he stays healthy and plays most of these games down the stretch, he's going to end up playing at least 82. So at the very least, he'll play in more than half the games this year. But he's had a 123 WRC plus when Westburg has been on the field. He's been just the level of all-star player he was in 2024, just with even larger injury issues than he had last year. All he's got to do is stay on the field, and he is an impact player in the dirt, in the batter's box for this Orioles team. And just that hasn't been the case for the last year and a half. You can say that about a lot of Orioles. That's why they have had so many struggles over the past year and a half. But Westburg is one of those guys who kind of leads this pack, leads by example when he's healthy, and they need him out there on the field. Second thing you need to know from Tuesday's win is that both of the new kids homered in this game. Samuel Basallo kicked it off. A go-ahead 2-run homer in the 4th off of White Sox starter Shane Smith gave the Orioles a 4-2 lead. 0-2 curveball down and in, out of the zone, and Basallo just scooped that thing deep into the right field seats down the line. 108 off the bat, traveled 420 feet for Basallo's 3rd big league home run since being called up about a month ago. And it's been a bit of a struggle. This is his 24th game he's appeared in the big leagues. It's a 60-something WRC plus. He hasn't exactly been great at the plate, but he's had big moments. He's already had 2 walk-off hits for the Orioles. He's had the 3 homers. You can see the potential there. Now, we know the catching definitely needs work, and it's very obvious Tuesday night, Basallo did get the start behind the plate with Dean Kremer pitching and then the Orioles relievers. That was very clearly Basallo's worst defensive game as a catcher in the big leagues so far. And we've heard about that, the blocking, the receiving is getting better. He's always had the strong arm. He's been able to show that off a few times in the bigs so far. They're working on the game calling. I don't really think it was any kind of huge game calling issue on Tuesday night. It was more of he just couldn't block the ball. And this is quite funny. As I am recording, the Orioles, it is now 8-7 as Chase McDermott gave up a 2-run single and Rico Garcia gave up a 2-run homer on the first pitch he threw. So we'll see if the tone of this episode changes because the Orioles need 4 more outs and they're only up by 1 at this point. But that's just been the nature of the 2025 Orioles season. But for Basallo, it's one game. Again, and he's 21 years old, and it's a position that, while it is his main position, because of injuries the last 2 years, he hasn't played the position in the minor leagues at the AAA level as much as the Orioles would have wanted him to. And he's going to have some games like this, and you hope that he gets those games kind of out of the way this year, maybe next year. And by the time, if he ever is settled as the Orioles' main catcher, I'm not sure that's ever going to be the case where he's catching 5 to 6 days a week. But if it ever gets to a point where, the Orioles are a winning team and he's catching as much as he is right now, you want those issues to be moved on from. It was just kind of a rough defensive night, but a good swing on that homer. And Dylan Beavers hit a home run as well. Ended up being, at least at this point as I'm watching, a huge insurance shot for the O's. Mashed a 2-run homer in the 7th inning that at the time put the Orioles up 8-2. It's now an 8-7 game. His second big league homer also had an RBI triple in the 5th. That was his first career MLB triple. He just continues to swing the bat extremely well, whereas Basallo's had big moments, but overall hasn't been that great at the plate since being called up. I mean, Beavers has an 867 OPS. He's just been consistently good at the dish for the Orioles. Third thing you need to know from Tuesday night is that Coby Mayo had himself a big night in the Orioles lineup. 3 hits for Mayo for just the second time in his career. He had a 3-hit game, 7th multi-hit game of the year for Coby Mayo. And you can't hide from it. It has been a rough first, I wouldn't call it a full big league season because he did spend time in the minors, but he's been up for most of the year for the Orioles. It hasn't been great. Quietly, he has been finishing strong. He's been really, really good. We're over halfway through September at this point, and Mayo entering Tuesday had a 129 WRC plus in September. That's going up with the 2 singles and the double that he had on Tuesday night. It's a 13% barrel rate in the month of September. That's been really, really good for his numbers. I'm intrigued, right? I've talked about it. I think the Orioles are going to do some sort of swing change for Coby Mayo this offseason. We will see what that looks like. Nice little running catch by Dylan Carlson to rob extra bases and end the 8th inning with the Orioles still leading 8-7. But, with these results looking a little bit better, you don't want that to change what the overall issue is, which is maybe a little too much tilt in his swing and inability to get pitches off the plate. But I think the big part was the double he had later in the game Tuesday. It was on a breaking ball from a righty that was outside off the plate. He reached out and poked it and pulled it down the left field line for a double. We really haven't seen him do much of that on pitches like that this season. So that is a good sign. And it really was overall a good offensive night for the Orioles. Now, hopefully, as we go to the top of the 9th here, they can add some more runs to make this one a little bit easier. But at this point, through 8 innings, 8 runs on 13 hits for the O's. Mayo was one of 5 Orioles who had multiple hits in this game. I mentioned Basallo already. Jeremiah Jackson had a couple of doubles, a walk and an RBI. Gunnar Henderson went 3 for 5 with 2 ribbies. Dylan Carlson, how about that? A single and double for Carlson in this game. His first multi-hit game in a month as he got the start in left field with Tyler O'Neill on the bench. So it was a nice offensive day. The only Oriole to this point who hasn't reached base is Colton Cowser 0 for 4 with a couple of strikeouts, but he had back-to-back days with home runs coming into Tuesday. So a good offensive output, something they haven't done a lot of in the month of September. This offense has really struggled. Yes, it is the White Sox, but Shane Smith was the White Sox all-star, and they got him for 6 runs in 4 1/3 innings. If there's one starter who can really beat you in this White Sox rotation, it is Shane Smith, and the Orioles got to him. So you certainly like to see that as well. Fourth thing you need to know from this, what hopefully ends up being an Orioles win, is that Dean Kremer looked pretty solid in his return to the mound. Now, Kremer ended up skipping a start After his last start, all the way back on September 5th against the Dodgers, he left after 3 innings with forearm soreness. Now, luckily, the MRI that Kremer got was clean, and the Orioles said, we're going to skip a start, but we'll see how he feels. And it ended up being 11 days later here on the 16th that he does take the mound again. And it didn't start out too pretty. Gave up a single and then a 2-run homer to begin the game from Kyle Teal, made it 2-0 White Sox. And, he kind of had a little bit of trouble in the second inning getting through early, but otherwise later in the start really kind of locked in. That splitter was dancing. He was getting just a ton of swing and miss on what, has been for the last 2 years his best swing and miss pitch. 8 whiffs on 15 swings on that splitter against White Sox hitters. They were also kind of whiffing on the four-seamer more often than you see, which was good for Kremer as well. He ends up going in his final line in this one, 5 2/3 innings, 2 runs on 4 hits, 4 strikeouts, 3 walks, and a home run allowed on 97 pitches for Kremer, just 5 hard hit balls. He probably should have gotten himself through 6, but he got out there in the 6th inning and just, I think, ran into a little bit of a wall because he hadn't pitched in 11 days. He walked 2 batters in the 6th, got his pitch count up, and was getting a little squirrely, even though it was a 6-2 Orioles lead at the time. Mancelino went out there to pull him, I think, especially because he had to skip a start. You just want to make sure all things are good. Most likely, the way the rotation lines up and the fact that it's a 6-man rotation, Kremer, he could get 2 more starts, but most likely he only has 1 start remaining here in the 2025 season. So let's hope it looks like going to be against the Rays at home next week. Let's hope that start goes well. He stays healthy. He goes into the offseason healthy. And the Orioles can just kind of count on him as a really good back end of the rotation starter in 2026. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from a game that looks like it's going to be an Orioles win over the White Sox on Tuesday night is that, at least for now, the Orioles bullpen has done enough to hold the lead. Yarmiel Geraldo was good in his return to the big leagues. He was recalled to the roster on Monday after he'd been down in AAA for a few weeks, and he came back looking great. Relieved Kremer 2 on 2 out in the 6th. I mean, just a nasty splitter to get a strikeout to get out of that jam. Then he puts up a 0 in the 7th as well, which was nice to see. A really, really strong outing from Geraldo. He had some big-time home run issues in his first stint in the big leagues when the Orioles called him up. Was a guy who they signed to a minor league deal back in the offseason. But, I mean, it's a good mix. It's fastball, slider, changeup. It's really more of a splitter than a changeup. But you watch that split change, whatever kind of pitch it is, I mean, that is one of the most disgusting changeups you'll see in the major leagues. And guys just swing through it at, honestly, an alarming rate. It is a really, really good pitch. He used it to get his key outs on Tuesday night. And I he's going to have options next year. So he's going to be an up-down guy who gives depth to this bullpen. But there's a level that Geraldo could hit where he's more of a mainstay in the 2026 Orioles bullpen. Like, I wouldn't count him out. The O's are certainly going to do everything they can to keep him on the roster throughout the offseason. And then we did get to see the return of Chase McDermott, who was also recalled to the Orioles bullpen on Monday. Had always been a starter, was the Orioles' #1 pitching prospect for a good chunk of time there, but the O's finally made the decision back in July to fully convert him to a reliever. He was honestly pretty dominant out of the Norfolk bullpen, was pitching in high leverage, and he is back here as a full-time reliever. And we got to really see that for the first time in the 8th inning on Tuesday. Now, for McDermott, a lot of tough luck, right? He came out there kind of guns blazing. You could tell the heart rate was beating a little too fast. 4-pitch walk to his first batter. He's coming in to hold an 8-2 lead in the bottom of the 8th inning. You don't want to walk a guy on 4 pitches. Then he settles down, and he should have put up a 0 in the 8th. With a runner on 3rd and 2 outs, he got a strikeout on a good slider, but the ball gets away from Basallo, gets to the backstop, the run scores, the runner reaches, and then McDermott goes single, balk, single. All of a sudden, it's 8-5. He's charged with 4 earned runs, and he's coming out of the ball game after 31 pitches, 2 Ks, a walk, 2 hits, and recording 2 outs. So tough luck for him. Again, he got the strikeout to end the inning. It's more of what was just really a rough defensive night for Samuel Basallo. But I like how the stuff looked. Like, he was a guy who we were seeing 94 from the fastball, 93, 94 as a starter. All of a sudden, we were seeing 96 plus in the bullpen in AAA. He threw some pitches up to 98. He was sitting 96 pretty easily with the fastball. I thought the cutter looked good. He only threw 2 changeups, but one of them was for a strikeout against a lefty, which was a really good looking pitch that he threw. He mixed in the slider as well to really throw a lot of different stuff that he has up there. The 4 earned runs not going to look good in the box score, but if you watch the game, you kind of know what happened. And I'm pleased with the first McDermott kind of true relief outing. And then he didn't get out of the inning, so Rico Garcia came in to just kind of settle things down at 8-5, and Garcia gives up a 2-run homer to Andrew Benintendi on the first pitch that makes it 8-7. Garcia gets out of the 8th, and as I'm watching, here comes Keegan Aiken for the bottom of the 9th in an 8-7 game. So hopefully this win holds up. You know, if you're watching or listening, because it's already Wednesday at this point, I'm going to be reacting live, as at least live for me, as this podcast goes on. But that's all the stuff that's happened through 8.5 innings in this ball game. Let's talk about a guy who ended up, I think, probably would have pitched in Tuesday's game if it had stayed around an 8-2 score line. But once it got to 8-7, that was not going to happen. And that is Jose Castillo, the newest Oriole reliever. Get you the scouting report on him coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. Prize Picks, it's fun to play, and it's an awesome way to stay locked in for the season. Like, I basically go to Prize Picks and I just say, Lamar Jackson, yeah, I'm taking more on anything. Derrick Henry, yeah, I'm taking more on anything. And they've got max discounts as well, which can make it easier to win. Like this Sunday, more or less on 0.5 passing yards for Patrick Mahomes. I would get on that one if you have the chance. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. That's at Prize Picks. It's good to be right. So as to my left, I watch Keegan Aiken try and close out somehow a game that's become a 1-run lead in the bottom of the 9th inning for the Orioles against the White Sox. Let's talk about another new left-handed reliever who has joined the Orioles bullpen, and that is 29-year-old left-handed reliever Jose Castillo, who the Orioles claimed off waivers from the Seattle Mariners on Sunday. He was not able to get to Chicago and report to the team until Tuesday, but when he did, he was activated to the roster. Again, unless this game goes to extra innings and the Orioles need to use him, it doesn't look like he'll make his Orioles debut quite yet, but he'll be another new pitcher that the Orioles would use this season. So who is Jose Castillo? First of all, he's a big guy, 6'6", about 250 pounds from the left side, that all the way back in 2012 signed with the Rays as an international free agent out of Venezuela. A couple years later, as a prospect, he was traded to the Padres in the Jake Bauers deal, and then eventually made it to the big leagues with the San Diego Padres in 2018. And in that first season, he was awesome. Like, Castillo was quietly, for a guy who, he spent the beginning part of the year in AAA, didn't get called up till like June or so, kind of mid-season. He was one of the better relievers in baseball down the stretch. He threw 38 1/3 innings for that Padres team, 3.29 ERA, 2.64 FIP, a 35% strikeout rate to an 8% walk rate is absurd for a rookie reliever. And the Padres were like, we might have like our lefty setup man of the future. That is what they thought about Castillo coming out of 2018. And then it was just injury after injury after injury for Jose Castillo. Pitched in only one game in the big leagues in 2019, had a flexor strain and a finger injury that kept him out for most of the season. Then pitched only one big league game in the shortened COVID 2020 season because of a lat strain. And then he had a torn ligament in his hand as well. And then in 2021, he was like, I'm finally healthy in spring training. No, I'm not. Leaves a game with an elbow issue, ends up getting Tommy John surgery in March of 2021. So, of course, misses the entirety of the 2021 season, misses the beginning part of the 2022 season as he's recovering. But once he came back in AAA, he was actually non-tendered by the Padres, then re-signed that offseason. Once he came back, he was really good in AAA in 2022, and the Padres were like, maybe we have our guy back, but he did only pitch again in one big league game in that 2022 season. Then came 2023. He was really bad. Once again, one big league game. Kind of crazy that year after year is pitching in one single big league game. And he was DFA'd by the Padres in July. They traded him to the Marlins mid-season. He spent AAA with the Marlins for the rest of the year. and then signed with the D-backs and was pitching in AAA with them in 2024. Again, missed some time with injury. Back with the D-backs this year and finally did get back to the big leagues, pitched in 5 games out of the Arizona bullpen. They DFA'd him on May 12th. It's been a merry-go-round of the last couple of years for Jose Castillo. They sent him to the Mets for cash, and the Mets saw a really good pitcher. He pitched in 15 games in relief for the Mets this season, and he was kind of awesome again. Like he kind of looked like that 2018 rookie Padres version of Jose Castillo. 15 and a third, it was 16 games, 15 and a third innings, 2.35 ERA. He was running 26% strikeout rate and 8% walk rate. His stuff looked really good from the left side, but he was out of options, and the Mets they've had a lot of bullpen crunch this year that the Orioles have kind of taken advantage of, Rico Garcia being another one of those guys, and they DFA'd him. He ended up with the Mariners. Seattle got him after the Mets had actually DFA'd him a couple of times, brought him back and forth between the big leagues and AAA a few times. DFA'd for good on August 30th, claimed by the Mariners, and he was good for the Mariners. He had 3 scoreless appearances out of the Seattle bullpen, and the Mariners ran out of roster space for him. So they DFA'd him on September 12th, and the Orioles claimed him over the weekend. So it has been a whirlwind for the 29-year-old. He's been good. He's been hurt. He's been kind of bad. There's still something in there, though, and that is why the Orioles went after him and gave him a roster spot. And back in 2018, when he was awesome as a rookie for the Padres, he only threw 2 pitches. It was a 4-seam fastball at 95 and a really good slider. And he basically threw those pitches like 50-50, each one half of the time. Righties, lefties didn't really matter. But this year, the mix looks a little bit different, and he's kind of more so fully gotten back to the big leagues. His slider is now his number 1 pitch. He throws that about 50% of the time, so he still loves the slider. But he's added a sinker, and that is now his main fastball. He throws the sinker about 40% of the time. He barely throws the old 4-seam fastball anymore, and that's because the stuff numbers on the sinker are just worlds better than they ever were on the 4-seamer. He basically found a better fastball. He'll throw a changeup as well now. It's not something he really had in his arsenal a few years back, but he gets big chase out of the strike zone with the slider and gets gigantic ground ball numbers when he throws that sinker. Guys just beat the ball into the ground against Castillo, which, as we see from guys like Cano when they're on, can certainly help him get out of jams. So how does he fit with the Orioles? Well, he is out of options. So that is why when they claimed him, they had to open up an active roster spot for him, which they did on Tuesday. But it's also one of the reasons why he has been DFA'd so many times by so many different teams, even just this season, because he's good enough to want him on your roster, but he's not so amazing that you can keep him around all year. And when he doesn't have that roster flexibility, guys end up getting DFA'd. So because of the point we are in the season, right? He joins the roster here with, when he joined Tuesday with 12 games remaining in the year, there's a good chance he's just on the active roster for those final 12 games. I guess it's possible they would put him on waivers as well. If they find another arm on waivers they like better than Castillo, that's certainly possible in these last 2 weeks, but more than likely he sticks in the bullpen. We see him pitch maybe 4 times out of the Orioles pen, and the O's just get a quick look at him, see if they're willing to stick with him, see if they, DFA'd him in the offseason, he'd be willing to stay in the organization. It's been 2 months of auditions in this Orioles bullpen. We know it. I know it. You know it. I've talked about it a lot on this podcast since they traded away 4 relievers at the deadline, and then Felix Bautista got hurt as well. It's all about auditions. It's another chance to audition a guy where, they like the slider, they like the sinker, they think it could be good stuff from the left side. And I think lefties in this Oriole bullpen are a little bit of a question, right? Like, yes, I am watching Keegan Aiken be 1 strike away from a save in the 9th inning, but he's a free agent after next year. He's kind of an up and down pitcher. Yes, Dietrich Enns has been great, but he's also 34 years old. Yes, Grant Wolfram has been great, but there's still some command issues. Like, I think even though he's still in the org, I think we're pretty much done with someone like CNL Perez. There are lefty questions in that bullpen. So adding another lefty who you can at least get a look at, never a bad thing, I think, at this point in the season for the Orioles. But to get Castillo here and to also get Jordan Westburg back off the injured list, the O's, of course, had to make some other roster moves to open space on Tuesday. We'll talk about what those moves are and what they were to finish off the show, and hopefully talk about a Keegan Aiken save coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Now, listen, most people, they kind of can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth. So whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments, And when you don't have time and don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, and get smart categorization of your spending. And you can finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. And I love Monarch Money because, with my wife, it helps us kind of bring our finances together, see everything that we need, and keep a clear view of our financial health. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. There is nothing like catching a baseball game live. The energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person, but actually getting tickets, that's a tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees, it takes all the fun out of it. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. The app makes it really simple to check out your tickets. I can even see my exact view from my seat before buying, and the fees are included. Again, you know your total up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. So let's talk about the couple of roster moves the Orioles made before Tuesday's game to finish off the show. But first, thank you to Keegan Aiken, who, as I was doing some ad reads, did strike out Colson Montgomery to finish the save. The Orioles, who led 8-2 in the eighth inning, hold on for an 8-7 win over the White Sox somehow, some way. Keegan Aiken, facing a patch of lefties there in the White Sox order, ends up getting 2 strikeouts to finish off the save. I still don't love Keegan Aiken in the ninth inning, but we will certainly take it. O's clinch the series. Orioles are now 71-80 on the season. And hey, they still have a winning record alive. If they win their final 11 games, they can still finish with a winning record. But let's talk about those roster moves, right? The Orioles added Jordan Westburg off the IL and Jose Castillo off waivers to the active roster on Tuesday, meaning, well, they had to clear up 2 spots on that active roster as well. The first one was Emmanuel Rivera, who was DFA'd to make room for Westburg on Tuesday. Now, Rivera, since being recalled in late August, has hit 280. That seems good. Emmanuel Rivera is the perfect poster child for why batting average just doesn't tell the whole story. Yes, is he hitting 280? And is that a great batting average, especially in today's game? Yes, it is. In 60 plate appearances. Not the biggest sample size, but not tiny either. It's also in that stretch still a 61 WRC plus, despite the fact that he's hit 280. As a hitter, he's been 39% worse than league average. Why is that? Because although he has all those hits, they've basically all been singles. It's only been 1 extra base hit. That's a double. And he didn't draw any walks at all. So you're not walking, you're not hitting for power. It really doesn't matter what average you hit for. If you're not getting on base in any other way and you're not thumping the ball, you're not really going to be a productive hitter. Just kind of a perfect way to show why, while batting average is still an important-ish stat, it doesn't nearly tell the whole story about a hitter. This is kind of an extreme example of that, but Rivera kind of shows that. Again, he plays a good third base, and that walk-off, I mean, we will never forget that moment, the comeback walk-off hit in the ninth inning against the Dodgers for Rivera. But the bat is just not there. And with Westburg back, there's just really nowhere for Rivera to even fit or play on this roster. And he's been DFA'd multiple times just this year. He's cleared waivers every time. At this point late in the season, another team doesn't really want Emmanuel Rivera. He's probably going to clear waivers again. Whether he accepts his assignment to AAA or not, the O's are probably going to offer him a minor league deal to come back this offseason, to come to spring training, to compete for a spot, to be depth. And Rivera seems to like that role he's had over the past year and a half. I think the Orioles like having him in that role. They like to be able to turn to him when they need to. I think Rivera will stay in this organization. And the other move to get Castillo here was that Grant Wolfram, the left-handed pitcher, was optioned to AAA to make room for Castillo. Don't love this one because if you've been listening to the show, you know I'm a big fan of Grant Wolfram. I think he has the goods. O's brought him over in a trade with the Brewers back in April. It's, a high 90s fastball with incredible slider and curveball from the left side, kind of long levers as the lefty. Wolfram, I actually thought Geraldo would go back down after being called up on Monday, but it does allow you to get a little longer look at Geraldo because you've gotten a lot of innings out of Wolfram, and he's got a 3.15 FIP in 26 innings out of the Oriole bullpen this year. Last 14 appearances, he's been great, just 4 runs, 22 Ks to 6 walks in 18 and a third innings. He still has options for next year. I think he's got the goods. I do think Grant Wolfram is going to be a bullpen piece for the Orioles for most of 2026. I know I just talked about how there are questions about the lefties in next year's bullpen. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. There's still questions about Wolfram, but I think personally, just my evaluation, Wolfram is going to be a dude for the O's next year. Sad that he will be finishing his season in AAA, but good that the O's get to hold on to him. Why Wolfram? He's a guy with options that allows you to keep everyone. You keep Wolfram, you keep Castillo. Yeah, not both of them can be in the big leagues, but they both stay in the organization, at least for now. And then the last little piece of kind of bad news to end the show on, but Albert Suarez, who we mentioned after making his first start of the year Sunday, was placed on the injured list with an elbow issue yesterday. He is getting a second opinion on his elbow, according to Tony Mansolino. That's never good news because do you ever hear of a guy getting a second opinion if the first opinion was something they wanted to hear? No, it's probably because the first opinion was not good news. That's not good for a almost 36-year-old who had a major shoulder injury this year. Now it's the elbow. As I said on yesterday's show, I feel like there's a chance here. We've seen Albert Suarez throw his last pitch as an Oriole, which is unfortunate for just how good, how crucial he was for this 2024 Orioles team. We certainly salute him for that. Hopefully he can get back on a mound. We'll keep you updated on what that looks like. But another piece of bad news on the injury front for the O's. It's just been a season, unfortunately, that has been full of that. But the Orioles can at least try and pick up another sweep here on Wednesday. They got a 2:10 matinee game in Chicago, game 3 between the O's and the White Sox. Tyler Wells takes the ball for the Orioles against the veteran lefty Martin Perez going for the Sox. And then I will be back with you tomorrow recapping game 3 between the Orioles and the White Sox and getting you continuously updated on some of this Orioles injury news as we're getting closer to maybe seeing Adley Rutschman back on the field, which is obviously a good sign. That's tomorrow. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.